They were only children. 3 orphans, left to starve in the cold streets while the world turned its back. No one wanted them. No one even looked at them. They were shadows, forgotten and alone, until one day, the ground shook with the steps of a man larger than life itself. A mountain man. He didn't offer kindness. He didn't speak of mercy. Instead, he placed a single coin, just $1, on the table. And with that, their lives changed forever. But it wasn't the dollar that silenced the crowd. It wasn't even the man's towering presence. It was what happened moments later, when the youngest orphan, with trembling lips and tear-filled eyes, whispered a name that froze the mountain man in his tracks. A name no one else could have known. What was that name? Why did it shatter the silence of a man who feared nothing? And how could a whisper from a child shake the soul of a giant? This is their story. The night was cold, sharp winds cutting through the valley like knives. In the shadow of the towering mountains, 3 small figures huddled together by a dying fire. Their clothes were torn, their faces streaked with dirt and tears, and their eyes too wide, too hollow, spoke of hunger, fear, and loneliness that no child should ever know. They were orphans left behind by a world that had no place for them. Villagers passed them in the streets, merchants shook their heads, and neighbors closed their doors tighter when they walked by. To most, they were not children but burdens, mouths that could not be fed, stories no one wanted to hear. And so, the 3 of them, 2 boys and a younger girl, sat by the edge of the town, unwanted, unseen, and slowly fading into shadows. The eldest boy, no more than 12, tried to keep his brother and sister close, whispering promises he had no power to keep. "We'll find food tomorrow," he would say, even as his own stomach twisted in pain. "Someone will help us." But each day passed the same. People walked by, eyes filled with pity but hands clenched tight, unwilling to offer even a crust of bread. Their father had died in the mines, their mother taken by sickness, and now no one wanted to claim them. It was easier to pretend they didn't exist. Then came the day that would change everything. The market was alive with noise, traders shouting prices, horses stamping on the frozen ground, and the smell of roasted meat drifting from stalls. The orphans stood at the edge, watching, their eyes locked on food they could not touch. Each time they stepped closer, they were shoved away. "Move along," a butcher snapped. "You don't belong here." Others muttered harsh words, calling them cursed, unlucky, or worse. And so, they retreated again, hungry, shivering, invisible. But through the crowd, someone was watching. He was not like the others. He stood taller than any man there, broad-shouldered, his frame wrapped in a heavy fur coat that looked more like it had been carved from the mountain itself than sewn by human hands. His beard was thick, his hair long and wild, and his presence sent a hush through those near him. Some whispered his name, though few knew if it was true. The mountain man. He came down rarely, only when supplies were needed, and when he did, people stepped aside. He carried with him the strength of the wilderness, the storms, the snow, and the silence of the peaks. His eyes fell on the 3 orphans. He saw what others refused to see, the tremble in their small hands, the blue on their lips, the way the youngest girl clung to her brother's sleeve, too tired to even cry. He walked closer, his heavy boots thudding against the earth. The crowd parted as he approached, curiosity burning in their eyes. The children froze, unsure if they should run or beg. The mountain man stopped before them. For a long moment he said nothing, only studying them with a gaze that seemed to pierce deeper than skin. Then, in a voice deep and rough from years of silence, he asked, "How long have you been out here?" The eldest tried to answer, but his throat was dry, his words cracking into nothing. The mountain man turned toward the merchants, his voice booming now. "What will you take for them?" The market fell silent. Eyes widened, whispers spread like wildfire. "He wants them, the orphans." Someone muttered. The butcher sneered. "They're no good, weak, sick, not worth the trouble." Another laughed, shaking his head. "Even if you took them, they'd never survive." But the mountain man's face did not change. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single coin. Its sound was sharp as it struck the wooden counter of the stall. $1, he said. Gasps rippled through the crowd. $1 for 3 orphans. Some chuckled, others scorned. "That's too much," one man barked. "Not even worth that." But the mountain man didn't flinch. His hand remained firm on the coin, his eyes fixed like stone. Slowly, the merchants backed away, muttering, unwilling to challenge him further. And so, with nothing more than a single dollar, the mountain man claimed them not as property, not as charity, but as something no one else dared to give them, a chance. He turned back to the children. "Come," he said simply. The eldest hesitated, his small chest rising and falling quickly. The boy wanted to believe, but the world had taught him not to trust so easily. Yet something in the mountain man's voice, something unspoken, pulled him forward. The younger brother followed, clutching the girl's hand. And so, step by step, they walked behind the giant of a man who had bought them for a price no one else would have paid. As they left the market, people stared, whispering, "Of madness and pity he'll regret it," one said. "They'll drag him down," another murmured. But the mountain man did not hear. His steps were steady, carrying them out of the noise. into the road that led toward the mountains. It was then, when the sound of the market faded and only the crunch of snow remained, that something happened. The youngest girl, no more than 6, tugged at her eldest brother's sleeve. She leaned close, her lips trembling, her voice so faint it was almost lost in the wind. She whispered one word, one name. The mountain man stopped mid-step. His shoulders stiffened. Slowly he turned his head, his eyes narrowing. That name, how could she know it? No one in the town knew. No stranger should have spoken it, and yet here it was, falling from the lips of a child. His breath caught, his heart pounding in a way it had not for years. The boy froze, staring at his sister. The mountain man lowered himself slightly, his massive frame bending down, his eyes fixed on the girl. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice low, almost breaking. The little girl whispered it again, softer this time, but clear. That name, his name, a name buried in the depths of his past, a name tied to memories he had locked away, a name that should have been impossible for her to know. And in that instant the mountain man's world shifted. The cold around him felt sharper, the silence louder, and the weight of years pressed against his chest. For the first time in decades, his eyes burned not from the wind, but from something deeper, something long forgotten. The 3 orphans did not yet understand what they had unleashed with that whisper, but the mountain man knew. His life would never be the same. The mountain man's breath turned to mist in the cold air, but his chest heaved as though he had run for miles. That one word, his name, hung between them like thunder. His massive hands, scarred from years of chopping wood and wrestling storms, curled into fists, not out of anger but out of something far more dangerous: fear. Fear of the past, fear of truths long buried, fear of memories he had sworn never to face again. The little girl looked up at him, her fragile face pale beneath smudges of dirt, her lips trembling yet certain. She had spoken it without hesitation, like she had always known, like it had lived inside her. Her brothers stared at her wide-eyed, unsure what she had done, afraid the man might strike or turn away, but he did neither. Instead he crouched down, his eyes level with hers, his voice low and raw. "Say it again." Her small chest rose and fell. She clutched her brother's sleeve tightly, but her gaze didn't waver. She whispered it once more, the same name, soft, tender, cutting through him like a blade. The mountain man shut his eyes. For a moment, the sound of the world fell away. He was no longer in the snow, no longer in the valley. He was back there years ago, when he was not the man people feared but someone else, a brother, a son, a man whose world had once shattered in silence. That name had belonged to him in another life, a life that ended in fire and loss. When he opened his eyes, they burned with something the children couldn't name. He rose to his full height, towering once more, but the weight on his shoulders, it seemed heavier. He turned without a word and began walking again. The orphans followed, small steps crunching in the snow behind his long strides, glancing at one another in confusion. None of them spoke, not even the eldest, who always tried to find answers. For once he had none. The climb toward the mountain was long, the road winding and steep. The town disappeared behind them, swallowed by distance and fog. The girl stumbled often, but the mountain man slowed his pace without turning, his ears sharp to every falter, his steps steady like a silent guide. The eldest boy watched him carefully, suspicion and hope wrestling inside him. Why had he taken them? Why for only $1? And why had his sister's whisper shaken him so deeply? When the sun began to sink behind the peaks, painting the sky in red and gold, they reached a wooden cabin pressed against the mountainside. Smoke curled from its chimney, the smell of pine and ash drifting through the cold. It was no palace, no mansion, just rough-hewn logs, a strong roof, and the mark of a man who had built it with his own hands. For the children, who had known only cold streets and rejection, it looked like a fortress. The mountain man pushed the door open. Warmth spilled out, washing over their frozen faces. Inside was simple but alive, a fire roaring in the hearth, shelves lined with jars, furs spread on the floor, tools hung neatly on the wall. The children froze at the threshold, afraid to enter something that felt too good to be real. "Inside," the mountain man said, his voice gruff. They obeyed, their small bodies shivering not from cold now but from nerves. He shut the door behind them, the sound echoing like finality. He moved toward the fire, tossing another log onto the flames, sparks dancing upward. Then, slowly, he turned, his eyes fixed on the little girl who had whispered his name. She sat close to her brothers, knees tucked to her chest, staring at the flames. "Who told you?" His voice cracked the silence, deep, demanding yet trembling at its core. The girl blinked. "No one," she said softly. "Then, how do you know my name?" She looked down, then back up with eyes far older than her years. "I just knew, like it was always there." The mountain man's throat tightened. He studied her face, the curve of her jaw, the shape of her eyes, searching for something, some ghost of the past that could explain it. And then he saw it so faint he wondered if his mind was betraying him. A resemblance, not in the way of blood perhaps, but in spirit. In the way she carried something lost. The eldest boy finally spoke, his voice bold, though his body trembled. "What does it mean? Why did she know your name?" The mountain man's gaze shifted. To him, his silence was heavy, almost unbearable, until he finally spoke words the children didn't expect. Because that name, he said, his voice breaking, wasn't meant to be heard again. The fire snapped, filling the silence that followed. The children exchanged nervous glances. The man turned his face away, as if the flames were easier to face than their eyes. Memories churned inside him, voices long gone, laughter stolen by tragedy, promises shattered by betrayal. He had buried that name when he walked into the mountains alone, leaving the world behind, for it to be spoken now by a child he had never seen before was more than coincidence. It was fate clawing back to him. The little girl whispered again, softer now, as if she could feel his pain. "It's your name, isn't it?" He nodded once, slowly, unable to deny it. The boy's brows furrowed. Then why hide it? Why fear it? The mountain man's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, his shadow stretching across the floor. "Because everyone who spoke it is gone." The children shivered, not from the cold but from the weight of his words. Their world had been filled with rejection and loneliness, but the sorrow in his voice was deeper than theirs. It was not just hunger or abandonment, it was a grief that had hollowed him out. The youngest girl crawled closer, her tiny hand reaching for his massive scarred one. He stared at it, stunned by her courage. Slowly, almost unwillingly, he let her fingers wrap around his. Her touch was fragile, yet it steadied him in a way nothing had for years. For the first time, he saw not 3 burdens, not 3 strangers, but something else. 3 small sparks in the darkness he had carried. He didn't know why the girl knew his name or what it meant, but deep inside, he felt it was no accident. Fate had not thrown them together without reason. Outside, the wind howled against the cabin, snow beginning to fall heavier. Inside, the fire burned brighter, warming not only their bodies but something buried in their hearts. The mountain man sat silently, the little girl at his side, the boys watching cautiously, as if waiting for answers. He didn't have them yet, but he knew one thing. Whatever bond had just been awakened, it would not be broken easily. And as the flames cracked and shadows danced on the walls, he whispered something he had not said in years, his name, spoken aloud again, carried into the world once more. The children listened, their hearts pounding. None of them could know yet that this whisper, hers and now his, was the beginning of a truth that would shatter all of them. The fire burned low, casting a dim orange glow across the cabin walls. The mountain man sat still, his broad frame hunched, the girl's tiny hands still resting against his. Her whisper lingered inside him, stirring ghosts he thought he had silenced forever. The boys leaned closer, waiting, sensing that something long hidden was about to surface. At last, he spoke. His voice was deep but quiet, each word heavy. "Years ago, I had a family, a wife, and a little daughter. She had your eyes." He looked at the girl, and for the first time, his face broke raw sorrow etched in every line. "But a fire took them, or so I believed." The eldest boy frowned, his heart racing. "What do you mean, believed?" The mountain man's hand trembled as he pressed it against his chest. "Because the name you whispered, that was the name only my little girl used for me, no one else. Not once since that night." Silence fell, broken only by the crack of the firewood. The girl blinked, her lips parting as if something inside her had always known. She crawled closer, eyes glistening, whispering it again, his hidden name, soft and certain. His breath caught. It was not chance, not imagination. The same voice, the same innocence, carried across years. His heart thundered. He turned sharply to the eldest boy. "Your parents, who were they? Tell me." The boy swallowed hard. "Our mother died of sickness," she said. "She said we were not to forget that our father was strong, even if we never knew him." His voice cracked. "She never told us his name." The mountain man's eyes blurred with tears he could no longer hold back. His chest shook, the walls of his silence breaking. He looked at the girl, her gaze, her whisper, her resemblance. His soul knew before his mind could. "You," he said, voice trembling, "are mine." The eldest boy gasped. The younger clutched his sister tighter, eyes wide with disbelief. But the little girl didn't flinch. Instead, she moved into his arms, as if she had been waiting her whole life for this. The mountain man crushed her to his chest, his massive hands trembling as he held her. Tears spilled into his beard, his heart breaking and mending in the same breath. He looked at the boys, his voice ragged. "And if she is mine, then so are you. You are all mine now." For children who had known nothing but rejection, those words shattered the chains of loneliness. The eldest's lips trembled as tears streaked his face. For the first time, he felt the weight of protection, of belonging. Outside, the storm raged, but inside, warmth grew stronger than fire. A bond forged not by coins or chance, but by blood, fate, and love lost and found again. The mountain man had come down for supplies. Instead, he had found his children, and all it had taken was a whisper of his name. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like the video, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Legacy if ignited for more powerful stories. Thank you for being here. Your support keeps these stories alive.